The hospital doors slammed open hard enough to echo down the corridor. Sterling Hawthorne didn't slow down. Blood darkened his sleeves. His knuckles were split. Men who ruled the city trembled at the sound of his voice. But here, nurses froze, guards hesitated, and monitors kept beeping as if he were nothing at all. "Where's my son?" he demanded. Behind reinforced glass, Rowan Hawthorne lay motionless in the ICU. Tubes crowded his small body. Machines breathed for him. The boy who once climbed onto Sterling's shoulders now looked impossibly fragile, like one sharp breath could shatter him. Sterling moved for the door. And that was when Maris Caldwell stepped in front of him. She was unarmed, smaller, calm in a way that cuts deeper than fear. "You can't touch him," she said. Sterling stared at her, stunned that anyone would dare stand in his way. "Move," he growled. Maris didn't flinch. "Not like this. Not with blood on your hands. Not with what you bring into this room." For the first time in his life, Sterling Hawthorne faced something his power couldn't crush.
A dying son.
A locked door. And a woman whose quiet resolve might be the only thing keeping Rowan alive. If you're hooked, stay with me till the very end of the story. Don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe button, drop a comment, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. I've got so many incredible stories coming your way, and you definitely don't want to miss any of them. Alright, let's get back to the story. Sterling Hawthorne had always believed he was careful. Every decision he made was calculated. Every deal sealed with leverage. Every enemy crushed before they could become a threat. His life ran on schedules, contingencies, and quiet dominance. And in the middle of all that order was Rowan. Rowan was the one rule Sterling never bent. Sunday mornings were theirs.
No meetings.
No guards hovering too close. Just pancakes burned on one side, cartoons playing too loud, and Rowan sitting on the kitchen counter, asking questions Sterling never quite knew how to answer.
"What do you do all day, Dad?"
"Why do people look scared when they see you?" Sterling would smile, ruffle his son's hair, and give him half-truths polished smooth enough for a child to hold. "I keep people in line," he'd say, "so they don't hurt each other." Rowan had nodded, trusting him completely. That trust was the most dangerous thing Sterling had ever carried. The call came just after midnight. Sterling was reviewing numbers when his phone vibrated. Once. Then again. An unlisted number. His chest tightened before he even answered. "Boss," a voice said, thin and shaking. "It's Rowan." There was a hit. Not meant for him. They missed, you understand? He was there. For a moment, the world went silent. No numbers.
No walls.
No air. "Where?" Sterling said, each letter dragged out of him. The address hit like a gunshot. Sterling didn't remember standing. He didn't remember grabbing his coat. He only remembered driving. Too fast, through red lights, his hands locked on the wheel as if he could squeeze time backward. When he arrived, the street was chaotic. Glass on the pavement. Sirens screaming. Rowan's backpack lay on its side, zipper split, school papers bleeding into the gutter. Sterling dropped to his knees without realizing it, his hand closing around a crumpled drawing. 2 stick figures, one taller, holding hands. Dad and me. Something inside him fractured. The men responsible didn't get a chance to run. Sterling found them before the police finished sealing the block. He moved through them like a storm with no memory afterward. Only blood, only screams, only the certainty that nothing he did would undo what had already been done. By the time he tore himself away, his hands were slick and shaking. His reflection in a car window looked unfamiliar.
"Hello."
"Feral." A medic shouted that Rowan had been taken to the hospital. ICU. Sterling turned and ran, leaving his empire burning behind him, chasing the one thing power had never taught him how to save. Maris Caldwell had learned long ago that fear was loud, but resolve was quiet. She was halfway through a double shift when Rowan Hawthorne was rushed in, small, unconscious, bleeding in places no child should ever bleed. The moment Maris read the name on the chart, the charge nurse stiffened. Phones started ringing. Security shifted closer to the ICU doors. Everyone knew what that name carried outside these walls. Maris didn't care. She washed her hands with steady precision, scrubbing until the world narrowed to soap and water and breath. In her mind, Rowan wasn't a surname. He was a patient. 7 years old. Critical head trauma. Internal bleeding. A heart struggling to remember its rhythm. Machines were prepared. Lines placed. Orders followed. Maris spoke softly to Rowan even though he couldn't hear her, telling him what she was doing, promising him she would not leave. She had just stepped out of the room when the hospital changed. The air tightened. Voices fell. Footsteps echoed, too fast, too heavy. Maris turned and saw him coming down the corridor. Sterling Hawthorne looked nothing like the men she'd seen on the news. He looked worse. His suit was torn. His hands were dark with dried blood. His eyes were wild with a kind of terror that didn't belong to someone used to being obeyed. Security moved hesitantly. No one reached for him. Maris did. She stepped forward and positioned herself squarely in front of the ICU door, her badge catching the fluorescent light. Her pulse was loud in her ears, but her voice stayed even. "You need to stop." Sterling barely registered with her. "That's my son," he said, already moving. Maris didn't move aside. "You can't go in there," she said. "Not like this." His gaze finally locked onto her, sharp and dangerous. "You don't get to tell me." "I do," Maris said quietly. "Because right now, I'm the only thing between him and everything that could kill him." The words hung in the air. She could feel every eye on her back. One wrong breath, one flicker of weakness, and she would be crushed. She didn't blink. "You're bleeding. You're unstable. You're carrying whatever you just came from," she continued. "If you step into that room like this, you put him at risk." Sterling's jaw clenched. His fists tightened. Maris held her ground, even as fear crawled up her spine. "I will protect him," she said. "From infection. From stress. From anyone who can't be what he needs right now." For the first time, Sterling Hawthorne stopped moving. And in that pause, small, fragile, human, Maris understood exactly how immovable she would have to be. Sterling had ended wars with a look. Men had folded under his silence, fortunes rerouted with a single word. Power, to him, had always been a language everyone understood. But Maris Caldwell did not speak it. He took a step closer. The hallways seemed to shrink around him, his presence bending the air. Security guards tensed, unsure whose side they were on. Doctors hovered at a distance, pretending not to listen. "Move," Sterling said, low and final. Maris didn't raise her voice. She didn't reach for help. She simply adjusted her stance, feet planted, shoulders squared. Like someone bracing against a storm, she had already decided not to flee. "I can't," she replied. "And I won't." Sterling laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes," Maris said. "And it doesn't change anything." He gestured toward the door. "That boy in there is my blood. I will see him." "You will see him," she said. "When it's safe. When you're clean. When you're calm." His eyes flashed. "I don't need permission." Maris finally met his anger head-on. "In this building, you do." The words landed harder than any threat. Sterling opened his mouth to summon the world. Lawyers, favors, consequences. But none of them lived here. The hospital didn't care who ruled the streets. The machines humming behind the glass answered only to biology, timing, and fragile margins. "You're delaying treatment," he snapped. "Every second matters." "And every wrong second kills him," Maris shot back. "Your heart rate alone could spike his. Your stress could trigger a crash. You think love makes you harmless. It doesn't." Sterling faltered. Just for a breath. Through the narrow window, He saw Rowan's chest rise and fall with mechanical effort.
Tubes.
Wires. A small hand taped to an four-line. His son looked breakable in a way Sterling had never allowed himself to imagine. "This is my fault," he said suddenly, the words tearing out before he could stop them. Maris didn't soften, but her voice gentled. "Then don't make it worse." Silence stretched. The hallway seemed to wait with them. Slowly, Sterling became aware of what he was holding, his gun, still tucked beneath his jacket. He hadn't even realized it was there, like a reflex he'd carried into a place where reflexes meant death. Maris glanced down at the bulge, then back up. She said nothing. Sterling swallowed. His fingers trembled as he removed the weapon and placed it on a nearby counter. The sound it made was small, pathetic, nothing like the authority it once carried. For the first time, Sterling Hawthorne understood the truth pressing in on him from all sides. Here, stripped of fear and obedience, his power meant nothing. And his son's life depended on what he was willing to give up next. Maris didn't move aside after the gun left his hand. Instead, she stepped closer to the glass, gesturing for him to follow. Sterling hesitated, then obeyed, his shadow folding smaller than it had ever been. "Look," she said.
He did.
Rowan lay motionless beneath the tangle of machines, his skin pale, almost translucent. The monitor traced a fragile rhythm, each beep sounding like a countdown. A ventilator breathed for him, steady and indifferent. Bruises bloomed along his collarbone where the impact had thrown him forward. A thin line of dried blood traced his hairline. "This isn't sleep," Maris said quietly. "This is his body fighting to stay." Sterling's chest tightened. He pressed his palm to the glass, as if it might warm his son through inches of barrier. "He's strong," he whispered. "He'll pull through." Maris shook her head once. Strength didn't bring him here, and it may not be enough to take him out. She turned to him then, eyes sharp, unflinching. "Do you know where he was when it happened?" Sterling nodded. "With my driver." "Behind a car meant to scare someone," she continued. "Because that's how your world works." The words cut deeper than accusation. Images surged without permission. Rowan laughing in the back seat, too young to understand why routes changed, why windows stayed dark. Rowan asked why his father never came to school events. Rowan waited up late, pretending not to notice when Sterling smelled of smoke and iron. "I kept him close to protect him," Sterling said, his voice cracking. You thought control was safe," Maris finished. "You thought fear would keep danger away." She gestured back to the bed. "This is what it brought him." Sterling closed his eyes, but the memories only sharpened. A smaller Rowan on his shoulders at a fair. Rowan fell asleep against his chest during late-night meetings. The promise he'd made to stop soon. To change before it mattered. Too late. "I did this," Sterling said. The words landed heavy, undeniable. His knees weakened, and he leaned against the wall, breath ragged. "Every deal, every threat, every enemy. I taught the world how to reach him." Maris didn't argue. She didn't comfort him either. "What matters now," she said, "is whether you keep choosing the same thing." An alarm chirped softly from inside the room. Sterling's head snapped up, terror flaring.
"He's still here," Maris said.
"For now." She met his gaze, unwavering. "If you want to be part of that fight, you don't come in as the man who caused this. You come in as the man willing to face it." Sterling stared at his son, tears burning hot and unfamiliar. Power had never asked him for anything. This moment demanded everything. Sterling's phone began to vibrate again, insistent, relentless. He ignored it at first, eyes fixed on the narrow rise and fall of Rowan's chest. The screen lit up anyway, a pulse of the world he'd built demanding to be answered. Finally, he looked. Names stacked one after another, lieutenants, fixers, men who never called unless blood was already spilling. A single message cut through the noise. They hit back.
3 blocks east. 2 down. Police swarming.
Another followed. Your absence is being noticed. Sterling closed his eyes. He could see it without being there, the streets tightening, old grudges waking, alliances cracking under the strain. His empire didn't pause for grief. It fed on momentum, on the certainty that he was always watching, always ready to strike harder. He typed a single word, then erased it. Behind the glass, Rowan shifted faintly, a tiny sound escaping the ventilator as if his body were struggling to remember how to breathe on its own. The monitor wavered, then steadied. Maris glanced at it, then back at Sterling, her expression unreadable. "You should take that," she said, not unkindly. Sterling shook his head. "If I do, people die." Maris held his gaze. People are already dying. The truth of it settled heavily between them. Another call came through. Sterling answered this time, pressing the phone to his ear without looking away from his son. "Handle it," he said. His voice was hoarse but firm.
No escalation.
"No retaliation without my say."
A pause.
Confusion. Then anger. "That's not how this works." The voice on the other end protested. "It is now," Sterling replied. "Anyone who can't accept that is done." He ended the call before they could argue. The phone buzzed again. He turned it face down on the counter, as if silencing a living thing. "I built all of that to keep him safe," Sterling murmured, nodding toward Rowan. "And it's still trying to pull me away." Maris watched him carefully. Power doesn't protect what it can't love. Sterling exhaled, long and shaky. In his mind, he dismantled the machine piece by piece. Safe houses, routes, contingencies, all the things he'd memorized better than his son's favorite stories. Let them crumble. Let them burn. Rowan's fingers twitched, barely perceptible. Sterling leaned forward, hope flaring so sharply it hurt. "I'm here," he whispered, though Rowan couldn't hear him. "I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, Sterling did not feel the familiar rush of command, the thrill of control. What he felt instead was smaller, steadier, terrifying in its fragility. He turned away from the phone, from the war unfolding beyond the hospital walls, and anchored himself to the only battle that mattered. Whatever it cost him, he had made his choice. Maris led him to the sink at the end of the corridor, away from the glass and the beeping machines. The stainless steel basin gleamed under harsh fluorescent light, unforgiving in its clarity. Sterling stared at his hands, as if seeing them for the first time. They were still stained. Not just with blood, though dark flecks clung beneath his nails, but with the residue of years, smoke, gun oil, the invisible weight of every choice he'd made. "Wash," Maris said. He turned the tap. Water rushed out, loud in the quiet hall. When he placed his hands beneath it, the shock of cold made him flinch. Red bloomed, then thinned, spiraling toward the drain. He scrubbed harder than necessary, skin burning, as if force might erase memory. It didn't. Images pressed in with every motion. A deal sealed in a back room. A man begging. A warning ignored because fear had seemed efficient. He pressed his palms together, nails biting into skin, breath hitching as the water carried more color away. Maris handed him a brush. "Under the nails," she said. "We can't risk infection." Sterling obeyed, humiliation rising like heat. He had ordered executions with less resistance than this simple act of compliance. When he finished, his hands were raw, trembling.
"Again," Maris said.
He looked up, anger flashing reflexively, then dying as quickly as it came. He washed again, and again. When the water finally ran clear, Maris turned it off and passed him a towel. Sterling dried his hands slowly, deliberately, as if afraid they might revert the moment he stopped looking.
"Your jacket," she said.
He hesitated, then shrugged out of it. The weight left his shoulders felt almost physical. He set it aside, then removed his watch, Custom, expensive, a symbol of time always bending to his will. It clinked softly against the counter. Maris nodded toward his shoes. Those too. Sterling complied, standing in thin socks on cold tile. Stripped of his armor piece by piece, he felt exposed in a way no threat had ever made him feel. "This isn't punishment," Maris said, reading his silence. "It's preparation."
"For what?" he asked.
"For being present," she replied. "For not bringing the world that hurt him into the room where we're trying to save him." Sterling closed his eyes. The man who had walked into the hospital, bloodied, armed, untouchable, felt like a stranger now. In his place stood someone smaller, quieter, afraid. When he opened his eyes, Maris was holding a disposable gown and gloves. She paused, then added gently, "You don't have to be strong in there." Sterling took the gown. His hands steadied as he pulled it on, the thin fabric whispering against his skin. For the first time, he wasn't washing away blood. He was letting go. Sterling sat on the bench outside the ICU, the thin gown rustling with every breath. The hallway had grown quieter, as if the hospital itself were holding space for what was about to break. "I used to read to him," Sterling said suddenly, staring at his hands. They looked wrong without weight, without purpose. Every night, same book, over and over. Maris stood a few steps away, arms folded loosely, listening without interrupting. He liked the parts where the hero failed. Sterling went on. A short, broken laugh escaped him, said it meant the story wasn't lying. His throat tightened. He swallowed hard. Then work got busier. The nights got later. I told myself he wouldn't remember the difference. He did remember. Sterling's shoulders began to shake, the realization cracking through him. I missed his first goal. His first lie. The day he stopped waiting by the window. He pressed his face into his hands, the sound that came out of him raw and unfamiliar. Not rage. No command.
Grief.
I taught him to be brave, he whispered. But I never taught him how to be safe. Maris stepped closer, her presence steady, grounding. She didn't touch him. She didn't need to. You're here now, she said softly. It doesn't erase anything, Sterling replied. He lifted his head, eyes red, unguarded. If he dies, I don't get to say I didn't know better. I knew. I just thought I had more time. The monitor inside the room beeped, distant but sharp. Sterling flinched at the sound, terror flashing across his face. I'm scared, he admitted. The words seemed to cost him more than any confession he'd ever made. Not of losing him, of surviving him. Maris met his gaze, unblinking. That fear means you're finally seeing him as more than an extension of yourself. Sterling nodded slowly. I don't know how to be the man he needs. You don't have to know, Maris said. You just have to stop pretending you already were. Silence settled again. Sterling's breathing evened, though his eyes remained wet. I would give everything, he said. The money, the power, all of it. Maris watched him carefully. Then be ready to mean that. A nurse called out from inside the unit. Rowan's vitals were shifting, unstable, but holding. Sterling stood, legs unsteady. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, then stopped himself, lowering it again. He straightened, not in command, but in resolve. Maris opened the door slightly, the light spilling out like a threshold. Whatever happens in there, she said, he'll know you came as his father. Sterling nodded, voice gone. For the first time in his life, he stepped forward with nothing to hide. The door stood between Sterling and everything he feared. Frosted glass, a red light above it glowing steady, indifferent. Beyond it, Rowan fought a battle no one could win for him. An alarm sounded, sharp, urgent. Voices rose inside the unit, clipped and fast. Sterling's heart lurched, panic crashing through his chest. What's happening? He asked. Maris checked the monitor outside the room, her jaw tightening. His oxygen saturation is dropping. Another alarm joined the first. The sound drilled into Sterling's skull, each beep a reminder of how little control he had left. "He needs you calm," Maris said, placing herself squarely in front of him. "If you go in there panicking, you make this worse." Sterling's hands trembled. He clenched them, then forced them open.
"Breathe."
He had ordered men into firefights with less fear than this, but this was different. This was his son. Inside the room, a doctor called out numbers. A nurse adjusted the ventilator. Rowan's small body jerked faintly, as if startled by pain he couldn't name. Sterling took a step forward, instinct screaming to rush in, to do something, anything. Maris stopped him with a hand held up, not touching him, just enough to slow him. "This is the last door," she said quietly. "Once you cross it, there's no fixing what you bring with you." Sterling closed his eyes. Images surged, his men waiting for orders, phones buzzing, streets on edge. The old reflex rose, demanding he split himself in two, handle everything, be everywhere. He couldn't. "I can't save him," he said hoarsely. Maris nodded.
"No."
"But you can be with him." The alarm spiked again. A doctor looked toward the door. "If he's going in, it's now." Sterling's breath hitched. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling his heart pound, wild and terrified. He thought of Rowan's laugh, of missed nights and unfinished promises. He reached back and placed his phone on the counter beside his jacket and watch. It stayed there, dark and silent. When he looked at Maris, there was no steel left in him. Only resolve, fragile and fierce. "I'm ready," he said. She opened the door. Warm air rushed out, heavy with antiseptic and the hum of machines. Sterling stepped forward, every instinct screaming at him to be strong, to command. Instead, he let himself be small. As the door closed behind him, the alarms continued their relentless song, but for the first time, Sterling wasn't running from it. He was crossing the threshold as the only thing that mattered. A father. The room was smaller than Sterling expected. Machines crowded the space, their steady hum filling the air like a mechanical tide. Rowan lay at the center of it all, dwarfed by the bed, his face pale, lashes resting too still against his cheeks. Sterling approached slowly, each step careful, reverent. He pulled a chair close and sat, unsure what to do with his hands until he remembered something simple. He took Rowan's fingers between his own. "They're warm," he whispered, relief and fear colliding in his chest. The monitor flickered, numbers shifting. A nurse adjusted a line, then stepped back, giving them space. Sterling leaned closer. "I'm here," he said, voice trembling. "I should have been here sooner. I know that now." His throat closed. He didn't force it open. "I can't promise I'll fix everything," he continued. "I spent my life thinking that it was love. But I was wrong." His thumb brushed Rowan's knuckles, gentle, uncertain. "If you wake up, I'll do better. And if you don't, I need you to know I tried. I finally tried." The machines answered with their steady rhythm. Time stretched thin. A tremor ran through Rowan's hand. Almost nothing. Almost everything. Sterling froze. "Rowan," he breathed. The monitor stuttered, then steadied. A doctor glanced up from across the room, interest sharpening into cautious hope. "We're seeing a response." Sterling didn't move. He stayed where he was, grounding himself in the simple act of being present. No orders.
No bargains.
Just breath and touch. Minutes passed. Or hours. He lost track. Rowan's eyelids fluttered once, just enough to break Sterling open. A sob escaped him, silent and shaking. "I'm right here," he said again, the words a promise this time. Eventually, Maris appeared in the doorway, watching without intruding. Their eyes met. She gave a small nod, not forgiveness, not approval, but acknowledgement. When the doctors ushered Sterling out, Rowan's vitals were stable. Fragile, but holding. In the hallway, Sterling stood barefoot on cold tile, lighter and heavier all at once. He knew the road ahead would be long. Redemption was not a moment. It was a choice made daily, painfully. He picked up his phone at last and deleted the contacts that had once defined him. One by one, some things could not be undone. But what remained, a love, accountability, the quiet courage to stay, was finally enough.